Apologies for the short delay. So I will be chairing this meeting as the Deputy Mayor. And I'd like to welcome the public and press to this extraordinary meeting of the Combined Authority Board. As I will outline, there are three parts to this meeting, and it's certainly my aim that we conduct as much of the business as we reasonably can in public. The reason for that is that obviously the public interest is that we are an open and transparent organisation. Nevertheless, there are issues under discussion which affect individuals, including members of staff of the Combined Authority. And it's appropriate that on matters that are confidential, including on a whistleblowing investigation, that we do protect the rights of those staff. And that in the discussion that we have, and any comments that are made by members of the board, that is honoured and respected. So I will, if necessary, intervene where I think we are erring beyond that boundary. So the three parts of the meeting are, first of all, we have a motion, which we have for debate in the name of Councillor Bowden and others. Second, we have a discussion on transition following the resignation letter, and the Chief Executive continues to work for the Combined Authority, the resignation letter on the 27th of April. Those matters unavoidably will be determined in confidence because they do significantly affect individuals. And third, we have a section of that report which we'll see how far we get to today, and I hope to encourage a spirit of goodwill, despite the fact that there's some very strongly held opinions to be expressed today. That includes a discussion of an improvement plan for the Combined Authority. And there are some areas of further work to be done on that. Personally, I believe that they would benefit from some further work, and subject to the will of the meeting, I would propose adjourning the meeting after an initial discussion, and that we have a further meeting to be arranged, preferably within the next 10 working days, to suit the members of the board so that we can conclude the work there. So I will be respectful, and I hope others will be. We do need to think about our hardworking staff of the Combined Authority, and also what we do as an organisation. We have a job to do. So I'm sure that we'll also talk about at times what the Combined Authority is delivering or what it would be capable of doing in the future. But the main issues are other than that. In terms of filming, the authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings. So people are welcome to take pictures or tweet during the meeting. Can I, though, ask everyone present to turn their phones to silent or vibrate for the duration of the meeting? And I would also remind everyone today that the public session of this meeting will be live streamed. I'm told that there are some issues with technology. So when we do go into the second part, I'm told that unfortunately, unless I'm advised otherwise, the technology does not allow us to reopen the live streaming. So part one, I expect to be in public. If people should start to talk about information which is in the confidential appendices or other matters which are may be rightly judged to be confidential, I would probably hear from the officers that it's a time that we do go into confidential. But I'm hoping that we can stay in public. So I'd remind everyone to take that into account. There are no fire alarms planned this afternoon. If the alarm does sound, I'll adjourn the meeting and we will make our way downstairs out of the building by the nearest exit and assemble at the far end of the building. So we've got several items. And so first of all, I come to Rob. Is there anything you want to say at this point?
I don't actually. I think, Deputy Mayor, you've covered all the points I'd want to cover, particularly around confidentiality and how we'll need to be extremely sensitive to that. But obviously, our start point is to want to remain in public session. So nothing else to say at this point.
Thank you. I would take this opportunity of welcoming Councillor Conboy, the leader of Huntingdonshire District Council, and note the changes that makes to the board membership. I also welcome Councillor Williams, who's the alternate member for Bridget Smith, who's the leader of South Cambridgeshire. Other than that, I see all present, other than I've got a statement to read out from the Vice Chair of the Business Board, but I might come on to that in a minute. So, so are you going to read that statement out, or?
If I was just going to give the apologies, if that's okay with you.
Sorry?
Can I give the apologies?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson, from Councillor Bridget Smith, who is substituted by Councillor John Williams, from Professor Andy Neely, who is the acting chair of the Business Board, and from Jan Thomas, who represents the CCG. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, yes, that includes a couple of members who are either voting or non-voting. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any items being considered today? No. Declarations of interest can also be made at any point during the meeting. So I have item 1.2. So I think I'll read out the statement from the Business Board Vice Chair at the beginning of the motion. So item 1.2 is public questions, and we have received no public questions, so we move on. So we turn to item 2.1, which is the motion in the names of Councillors Bailey, Bowden and Fitzgerald. Item 2.1. This follows the submission of a requisition by 3 current and 2 former members of the board requesting that an extraordinary meeting be held. This report contains 2 appendices which are exempt from publication under Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, in that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information relating to an individual, information which is likely to reveal the identity of an individual, and information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, included the authority holding that information. If board members want to discuss those exempt appendices today, we will need to consider whether the press and public should be excluded from that part of the debate. Does any board member want to specifically say that they want to discuss the exempt appendices? Councillor Bowden and then Councillor Bailey.
Deputy Mayor, I'd very much like to refer to them, but I'm more than happy to start off the meeting by excluding any reference to those appendices so that as much as possible can be said in public before we go, if it's decided by the board to do so, into exempt session.
Bailey?
Yes, the same from me. Thank you.
I think Sir Fitzgerald is nodding his head too. So I think the impact, that's perfectly proper because there's a lot to discuss. The effect will be probably that the live streaming will conclude at that point. But we will obviously notify people when we come back and we're going back into the public session. So effectively, there will be 3 parts. There will be a short adjournment after part 1 before we go into some issues on the transition. And I will aim that the press and public are able to be party to the 3rd discussion on an improvement plan that is being considered by the authority. So we'll start by discussing the public report. And we'll discuss the public report first, and when that debate concludes or when people want to go into discussing the appendices, I'd appreciate if people indicate that they want to do that, but because that will be an easier form than intervening. In discussing the public report, I would remind all board members of the importance of taking care not to release sensitive personal information or to discuss such information in a public forum. Special care must also be taken not to say anything which could prejudice, presume the outcome of, or to seek to supplant the constitutional process for the consideration of complaints set out in the Combined Authorities Constitution. And the consideration of there being a code of conduct investigation is also a matter, given that investigation is underway. For those watching today who may be less familiar with our processes, I would also add that co-opted members of the board are welcome and encouraged to contribute. And we have here today the Police and Crime Commissioner, welcome. And we also have Edna Murphy, Councillor Edna Murphy, who is the chair of the Fire Authority. Also for public information, they do not have votes under the constitution that was written for us, but all of the other members present do have votes. So we welcome that. So I come to the point where I ask the monitoring officer to introduce the public report on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Combined Authority Board, members of the public. So a report has been presented and is made public, and this meeting arises in response to a requisition which was issued to the Combined Authority, which was validated in terms of its constitutionality as to the proposal of a motion and it's being validly executed. This meeting has therefore been called. You have before you on the motion on notice specific wording, and I will read that wording now. So that wording is, in light of the matters listed in confidential appendix 1, the CPCA board invites Dr. Nick Johnson to consider resigning as mayor of the Combined Authority, or alternatively voluntarily suspending himself as mayor of the Combined Authority until all of the matters referred to in the confidential appendix are procedurally concluded. And that's part 2 of the motion. This motion, including confidential appendix 1, is to be forwarded immediately to the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, DLUC, and then limb 3, if the mayor has neither resigned nor voluntarily suspended himself in accordance with clause 1 above, within 7 days of the passage of this motion by the CPCA board, the CPCA board shall be deemed to have passed a motion of no confidence in the mayor, and the CPCA shall immediately send a request to DLUC to request emergency support for the CPCA to assist the CPCA in fulfilling its legal responsibilities, given that there will have been a breakdown of trust between the mayor and the board. Chair today has referred to the importance of separating out matters of sensitivity for staff in this debate, but also in not seeking to supplant Chapter 19 of the Constitution of the CPCA, which deals with member conduct matters. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions from the board? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Not so much as a question, but I'm not sure where else, because this might come up. So I don't intend to refer to confidential matters. But what we must set out from my point of view, because there's been much press speculation about how this came about. Why has this requisition been put to the Combined Authority? And I'll be quite clear, it's nothing to do with party politics. Nothing whatsoever.
Sorry, Councillor Fitzgerald, I asked for questions.
I did say that, Councillor Herbert. So if
this isn't the time for personal statements.
Well, I'm coming to a question, but I'm setting out some background beforehand. But you have to give me the chance to do that. So the fact is, I signed this motion, and it gives me no pleasure to be here today. It's not something I was looking forward to, whether I was sat where you are, Councillor Herbert, or here. The fact is, I signed this following a session that most of you were on on the 18th of April that left me concerned.
I do need the question, Councillor
Okay,
Fitzgerald.
right.
You can make as much comment as you wish in the main debate.
I will do. So what I'm going to ask is why Councillor Herbert is chairing this meeting in light of the relationship with the mayor and himself. It's not exactly impartial. Thank you.
Well, my view on this is, having been on this combined authority for all its existence and 2 years before, and having had a high view of standards throughout 25 years as a councillor, that I am here to conduct a fair debate. I have put forward an amendment, which I'm entitled to as a board member, but I can assure you that I will honour the principles. I am aware of comments you've made in the media, and I'm aware also of how some of the private meetings were held. And I just personally believe that I will conduct this in a fair manner. I'm not saying that you wouldn't, but the mayor was using powers that he has to appoint me. I didn't seek preferment, but I do believe, for the purposes of the current position of the combined authority, I will make a significant contribution, as well as holding the mayor to account. The mayor is subject to a member code of conduct investigation, which started in the middle of April. I would like to see a clear timetable, at which point there will be a further discussion and debate fully by this combined authority.
Sure, I'll have more to say when the appropriate time comes. Thanks.
If I could just jump in. So in really simple terms, the law requires that a deputy mayor is appointed, and the mayor, that's an appointment directly by the mayor, and the mayor is able to simply do that by way of notice. And I can confirm that I duly received that notice. And the constitution requires that the deputy chair chairs a meeting in the absence of the mayor. Sharing with the meeting today, as I've already written to board members, I provided legal advice to the mayor of the combined authority that he should not participate in today's meeting, to ensure that any potential for a challenge on the basis of bias or predetermination is avoided, given that the matters before the committee essentially touch and concern himself. So hopefully that's a helpful answer.
One small point, if I may, and it's just for clarity. The mayor's letter to me said you requested. I think he meant to say advised.
I certainly, I need to go back to the details of the letter. Well,
if you requested that he replace me, that would be raise an eyebrow.
I think I can. I'm very happy, Councillor Fitzgerald, to put on a record that I have absolutely not requested that the mayor stand you down. Please be assured.
I think if you read the letter, that's what it says. But I trust you. Don't worry.
Okay, it's as it is. And we have business to conduct. So what I propose to do, and also, well, I will refer to the fact that I will, as I've said, be proposing an amendment, but that should not take away from the opportunity to start with the original motion. So I will be moving an amendment. A copy of that amendment has been shared in advance with members of the board, not by much, but I tried. And has been published this afternoon on the Combined Authority website, and paper copies are available in the meeting room. The monitoring officer has ruled the amendment to be in order as drafted. So if we could circulate those paper copies, including a paper copy for people at the table if there is a supply. I won't refer to that at this stage, and we'll come back to moving the amendment. I propose, if the board is happy for the original motion to be moved and seconded, then I will move the amendment, then we will debate. If that's acceptable, I will open the debate and invite Councillor Bowden to move, if that is the case, the motion.
Just a Deputy Mayor, I will speak to the validity of the amendment at the point in this meeting that it's seconded. Okay.
Councillor Bailey.
Just to seek some advice on the process, thank you. Given that we're about to move the main motion and second the main motion, and then you're going to immediately put your amendment, I'd like to understand at what point, given if we debate the amendment and the amendment passes, it becomes a substantive motion. So I would like to understand at which point I will be able to ask to be able to refer to confidential matters. Given that in that scenario, it is unlikely that we're going to debate the main motion, given who's in the room.
Well, in my own authority, we take them together. But I accept that others do not.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's a purely procedural point. It is important that we have as much of today's debate as possible in public, but we all recognise that as things currently stand, there are things which some of us will wish to refer to, which it is likely the board will agree need to be treated as exempt items. If the main motion is replaced or amended as a result of your amendment, it will not then be possible constitutionally for those matters that some of us wish to raise, which can be raised against the main motion, to be raised against the motion as amended. So it's that point which I think Councillor Bailey was trying to elucidate from you, how we're going to be able to overcome that problem. Thank you.
My proposal, which I did make but didn't elucidate, was that we take the two discussions together, and at the end of the debate, we then have the vote on the amendment first, and then the vote on the substantive motion or the original, or if it's defeated, no further vote.
So just again, my apologies, just to make sure I've got this completely clear. It's not a procedure I'm used to, but if I understand correctly, you will move your amendment and that will be seconded. We will then continue to have open debate, both about the main motion and the amendment together. And then if it is so desired, and if the board desires, we will go into exempt session, have further discussion before a vote takes place on first of all, the amendment, and then if necessary, on the amended motion.
I would presume a summary to conclude on both the mover of the amendment and the mover of the motion. So we will aim to discuss it. And I think it's in that form, people can make a contribution which both speaks to the amendment and to the substantive. But I will take guidance from the monitoring officer, because I don't think that we should have repeated speeches, and I would hope that people may speak once in the debate, unless they're the mover and seconder, where the mover gets the right to reply. I know that people might have quite a bit to say, but and I'm not trying to truncate the part one of this meeting, but I do ask that, and I will require a speaking limit of 5 minutes, because I just do not think that taking longer than that is justified, given that there is a significant amount of business to be conducted, and in order to ensure that people listen fully to each speech and respect the speakers at the time. I invite Councillor Bowden to propose the motion in his name and that of Anna Bailey and Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I do so formally propose. I'm obviously quite correctly, according to the guidance which has been laid down, restricted as to what I can say, and I will be extremely careful not to break the rules. If I come anywhere close, please do make sure that I'm aware of it. We're in a very serious situation as far as the Combined Authority is concerned. We all know that the business of the Combined Authority has come almost close to grinding to a halt. There are procedural things which are not happening as a result of the position that the authority is in. And we're also all aware around this table, and I'm going to be careful not to be specific here, of some truly dreadful things which are either alleged to have happened or which have been found in an investigation which has been completed to have happened, which are absolutely outrageous and unacceptable so far as any constituted democratic body in this country is concerned. And I've seen, as well as others, the leaks which have taken place, the Municipal Journal and others, over the course of quite some considerable period of time since last year. Those of us, with the possible exception of Councillor Conboy, who may not, and Councillor Williams, who may not have had the advantage, if that's the word to use, of this, we had the dubious pleasure of seeing the unexpurgated version of the draft report, the draft initial report, where things which are, I believe, may now well be hidden in the version which has been semi-published to us, where things which are quite astonishing are apparently had been taking place. And I can't be specific about them, but truly astonishing things. Now, all of this has been on the mayor's watch. I'm not accusing the mayor of personally doing anything, but it's happened on the mayor's watch. Only the mayor actually knows the extent to which he has responsibility or not for the various things which have taken place. And it's my personal opinion that he's not been personally directly responsible for the overwhelming majority of the most serious items. But the point is that the mayor's position is not a good one at the moment, and we know that there is an investigation going on at the moment to which we will not be allowed to refer in any detail, and I quite understand why not. But it does place the mayor in an invidious position. And I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to ask the mayor if he considers, given that position, and given some of the allegations that were made, and allegations made as to process of the investigation, not merely about what was being investigated, but the process of the investigation, whether it's appropriate for the mayor to continue as he currently is, or whether a voluntary suspension may be appropriate. Now, we've got a number of different ways of approaching this, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I think the most constructive way is if we as a board can work together collectively, given that collectively we as a group of constituent authorities have the greatest amount to lose if the combined authority continues to go from bad to worse, and maybe it gets substantially worse than it is now. And just to give an example, if I may, Mr. Deputy Mayor, of just how bad things have gone, we were told a few weeks ago in the board meeting, quite openly, it was a public meeting, that the opportunity for some £22 million of retrofitting of home insulation to be organised through the combined authority for the general region had been lost during all but 1 month during the mayor's tenure. And again, because of our failure, whereas the West Midlands, which was in exactly the same position, but the same scheme, managed to utilise all of its money. Well, I can tell members of the board from my sources, and it's not yet been made public to members of the board, of course, very few things are these days very easily, but that 22 million now apparently is 133 million pounds of money, which has been or will be lost from the LUD2 and the Sustainable Warmth System programmes. 133 million pounds, sorry, of public money having to be refunded to central government, or not coming to us in the first place, which otherwise would do, because of the situation that this combined authority is in. It's really serious. That's merely one scheme. There are many other schemes. I could name some from my own area, which are also under threat, purely because of the administrative problem that this authority now faces itself with. Now, the way for us to move forwards, I suggest, is for us to try to reach some sort of consensus. And in that spirit, I would like to suggest that there be an amendment to the motion I'm putting forward, or rather a withdrawal of almost all of the motion that I'm putting forward. And I'm more than happy, Chairman, to withdraw item 2, item 3, and in point 1, the words either resigning as mayor of the combined authority or alternatively, to leave it just with the wording that we ask the mayor to consider his position and consider whether it's appropriate for him voluntarily to suspend himself until the matters which are currently under investigation are resolved. And we need some breathing space. In fact, I think the mayor personally probably needs some breathing space as well. And we are in a situation where we collectively need to move together. If this becomes party politicized, if worse, we find ourselves in a position where unacceptable behavior is defended on a party political basis, if we get to that stage, we're going to tear this authority apart. And that is not an acceptable position to be in. So on that basis, Chairman, without Deputy Mayor, without making, I don't want to over dramatize the situation. I'm certainly not being specific about some of the things which have been said, some of which have been quite lurid, and some of which I've had difficulty actually believing the words I've seen written down in the draft reports and the reports themselves. But given the situation that we're in, I hope that what I'm proposing is a reasonable compromise that we could work out. At the end of the day, we as a board, under the Constitution and under the legislation, we actually can't do anything to the mayor. We can't tell him to suspend himself. We can't even pass a motion of no confidence in him, which actually has any effect. We have no right to do that whatsoever. What we can do is just ask him to consider his position, which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing for us to do. So with your permission, Chairman, I'd like to withdraw all of the motion, those parts which I've just mentioned, to leave a very simple proposition on the table for members to consider. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, that was possible before the meeting, but we started the meeting and you've been moving your motion. Our amendment is based on that motion. So my ruling is that if you want to withdraw the whole motion, that is your choice, but otherwise we are debating the motion as moved.
On a point of order, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you have not moved an amendment. An amendment is only moved after a motion is put forward. Before you move any amendment, have made a suggestion which doesn't have to be accepted. I'd be happy for it to be put to a vote. What I'm seeking to achieve here, Deputy Mayor, is consensus. And I would hope that you would assist, if the board wishes to have consensus. If you don't wish consensus, and if you actually wish to encourage.
Thanks, Councillor Bowden. You've introduced your motion and we now have a contribution by the monitoring officer.
So I'll make a ruling on this. As the proposer of the motion, I consider it within Councillor Bowden's gift to modify it on presentation.
Okay. But I take the points that Councillor Bowden made, and if he's modified his motion, does that mean there's any opportunity for people within the meeting to take a view on the new wording? I still regard my amendment to be an amendment to the whole motion as amended. I have considered my position in advance of the meeting, and I intend to stick to the original amendment, and I'll explain that in introducing it.
So just to assist the meeting, so I think Councillor Bailey, are you confirming that you second that?
I would like the opportunity to second it. Yes.
Just to keep order and sense to the matter, perhaps when the first part, the presentation on the first part of the discussion has taken place, if we then get to the point of the proposing of the amendment, we may want to just pause to adjourn to see what it is we're amending, but it will be the substantive motion in its form that Councillor Bowden has presented on presentation there. So,
okay. Okay, well, I intend after Councillor Bailey's, if we need to have an adjournment after Councillor Bailey's spoken, then we will have, but my intention is to move the amendment in my name insofar as it is stated, and the wording in that is of some importance. Bailey, your opportunity to second the motion as amended.
Thank you. I think I'm capable of doing that, hopefully. Yes, I absolutely support the altered motion that Councillor Bowden has just articulated. So only is in relation to voluntary suspension only. And I just want to start by saying that I am horrified by how this situation has been portrayed in the media on incorrect and incomplete information, and trying to rewrite the narrative as though it has something to do with politics. It is absolutely abhorrent to me. And I feel for the staff that have suffered at this organisation at the hands of individuals that have to read that content, and the media and the press and those that are engaging in that activity need to look at themselves very, very hard. Mayor Nick Johnson is the leader of our organisation. It's an organisation that is failing the people and businesses of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough catastrophically. But today absolutely isn't about that. And today is not about politics. Today is about the staff of our organisation for whom we have a collective responsibility and a collective duty of care at this board. Today is about personal integrity and leadership that each and every one of us, including the Mayor, is required to uphold as part of our duty to abide by the Code of Conduct and the underpinning NOLAM principles that we're all signed up to. I signed the requisition order a long time ago now. It was held up because of Purdah. It was held up because the Mayor said he wasn't available before the 18th of May. That is what the cynical activity that is going on with this. And I signed the requisition order because I believe it is absolutely necessary. And in the fullness of time, I do believe people will come to understand why my personal integrity will be intact having signed the requisition order. I've discussed this situation with the former chair of the business board, Austin Adams, who has shown himself to be have high integrity, a man of honour, who has frequently and most of the time supported the Mayor in his decision-making on this board. And he has been accused of jumping into bed politically with certain people in this matter. And that is absolutely not the case. He has not signed the requisition order for political purposes. We know some of what has taken place at this board, and we know every single member of this board that's read the paperwork and been involved in this situation knows that it is completely and utterly unacceptable and cannot be tolerated what has taken place. 26 members of staff have already left this organisation since the Mayor took over. More resignations have happened, more people are due to leave. Many, if not most senior members of staff have left or are leaving. That tells you every single thing that you need to know, that this is a broken organisation. There are matters that took place during the first investigation that make it necessary to protect staff from this continuing. The behaviour hasn't ended. For some people in our organisation, their nightmare continues day and night, and I ask you to think about them. The extent of the impact of the behaviour of the Mayor and his senior member of staff, Nigel Pawley, on Eileen is absolutely shocking to me to hear. And it's so bad that Eileen's
members, let's just be super cautious. If we need now to consider going to private session, can we do so to ensure that people can be free to speak, but also that we respect highly sensitive matters? So, question, Chair, do we need to reflect now?
So, Councillor Bailey, you're starting to make claims about the Mayor, and I'm not clear about what evidence you're offering.
I'm alluding to information that is in the public domain. Somebody's put it out there. I apologise to
well, I don't think there's any recorded evidence. I'll give you extra time, but you've used up 3.5 minutes of your 5 minutes.
Our Chief Executive, Eileen, is a woman of considerable standing and experience, a colleague that many of us in this room and the Mayor selected and invited to be our CEO, a colleague that holds enormous and well-earned respect in professional circumstances. The organisation has had to commission a mediation package to try to...
Chair, sorry, I'm just looking at our HR lead. I fear that we are really in serious state.
We have a separate item on this.
Let's pause there. If we need this debate to move into private session to allow...
in the public domain.
It matters. I don't want to discuss matters which may or may not be in the public domain. I don't have all of those details in front of me, so I'm not going to make a ruling on whether they are.
Okay.
So could I ask that we take a serious pause to reflect on whether this meeting now goes into private session? I do not want to put at risk discussion of any matters that are outside.
Well, it has, yeah. I'm sorry.
If you wish, it may facilitate you giving the sort of robust presentation that you want if we move into private session.
Well,
so, Chair,
I'm happy to do that later. I believe, well, I know I'm alluding to matters that are already in the public domain, but I accept what you said and I apologise.
To assist me in my role, I'd prefer that we keep to the confines of what I say, or what the reports say, which is anything that's referred to in any of the documentation on a strict basis, we should not be speaking to apart from in private session. So please put out of your mind things that you may consider to be in the public domain. It is what is in reports.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment as chair? because items may have been referred and leaked doesn't mean that it's appropriate to dig into them. So I similarly will rule us moving into closed session if there's further discussion on such matters.
Okay, it is my personal opinion that the mayor appears to have no insight into the suffering of people in our organisation or the effect of his own behaviour. And board members cannot rule out that other staff are feeling this way. And I ask all of you, are you seriously prepared to leave people exposed in this way? We know what they're exposed to, it's in the paperwork, in the full knowledge of what has and continues to take place. This organisation is failing, it's broken, and it's happened.
Look, if you're going to continue this attack in trying to claim that the mayor is personally involved
I
in
made a personal
ongoing
opinion.
behaviour.
I made a personal
there may be a
No, I'm
place.
sorry.
Chair, just to assist, I think there may be. It's very difficult. It is. I think this is demonstrating how difficult it is to separate matters off, and I would strongly encourage that we consider either a very different style presentation on this, or that we move into private session so that it can be as robust as possible, if that's what is wished.
Well, what I propose as chair is that you've spoken for 5 minutes in addition to the interruptions, Councillor Bailey, and that I will not stop you saying further things in the following debate, but you've used up your time as seconder. And I propose now to move the amendment and have that seconded. And if you wish to go into private session after that, then we can do that. But
I would say, Chair, just on the basis of what we've heard, feels extremely difficult to support the management of this meeting without it going to private session.
But I think that you'll find
perhaps after your amendment is considered.
Yeah. So there's no intention in moving the amendment to release personal information or make personal attacks.
Thank you. My apologies for interrupting, Deputy Mayor. You're just about to move your amendment. I would like formally to object on the grounds that it breaches paragraph 15.1 of Chapter 5 of the Constitution, in that it is negating. The motion as it currently stands is very simple and clear, and it states that the board will take the action of inviting Dr. Nick Johnson to consider voluntarily suspending himself. Your amendment, as written, makes it quite clear that the board does not support any action by the board. One is a very clear negation of the other. It's not the same negation that the monitoring officer ruled on earlier today, because now we have a different substantive motion in front of us. And I just wonder if the monitoring officer would care to have a short period of time to reflect on this before making a ruling. A short intermission may be appropriate.
I'll invite the monitoring officer to make a comment, and I will then make a comment.
Well, I'd like it to be proposed first and seconded before I make a ruling on whether it is procedurally valid, noting in particular the point on negation.
I think there's a spirit of having a discussion in the open forum as well, Councillor Bowden. So we will see how we get on. So in looking at the motion, as a member of the board, and considering all of the issues, including what has actually happened and the nature of the whistleblowing event, I was concerned that along with the leaking, there's been a prejudging of the mayor. And so in the calling of the meeting, particularly as it was called in the knowledge that there was going to be a formal code of conduct investigation that the monitoring officer then instigated, the effect of the original motion was to effectively try and be judge and jury before the matter had been investigated. There is a whistleblowing investigation. It does concern the mayor's office, but the actual actions of the mayor are still to be judged. There is a couple of comments in the public report, but there are also comments that have been made as part of the investigation that the mayor was fully helpful and supportive of that investigation. So An investigation into matters has been published, and in fact, some of it is in the public domain. So the purpose of the amendment, and it doesn't really change with the reduction in the text of the original motion, is to say that there should not be a prejudging of the mayor. The mayor isn't able to be here today, and various statements can be made without his ability to rebut them. And the proper time for the motion is when that investigation is completed. Nothing in the motion respects the fact that there is a process underway. So the mayor will be asked questions, there will be an independent process, and then is the time for this board to judge it. That process also involves the Audit and Governance Committee, which has the benefit that it doesn't look like a political slanging match. So I do want this combined authority to overcome yet further hurdles and bumps, and it will be for the mayor to respond to that investigation. So if we actually go to the wording that I included and has been circulated, I do see some of the leaking as being an attempt to prejudice and prejudge issues. And I did see the motion's language in suggesting that the mayor resigns as being something to say, well, you've been found guilty. Well, that is not, we're not at that stage. And I do not, I haven't seen any evidence, even in the leaks, that suggests that that should be the case. I know Nick Johnson as an honourable individual, and I don't believe that he has anything to hide. And I think he'll be completely open at that stage. So we support, on the conclusion of that investigation by the combined authority, a full and open debate and full publication. As has been clear, and I do believe the person who leaked this was someone who was actually causing unnecessary damage. There's been a lot of hurt caused by that, but I am aware of how much trouble was caused and was rightly brought to the public attention by the whistleblower. And a lot of the evidence that is available to board members and will be then carried over. So I did not appreciate or believe that a divisive motion of the kind that attacks the mayor in the way that the original motion was appropriate. And I do not believe that this is in any way a clear negation. It is to set the position straight and to await the outcome of that code of conduct investigation. Thank you. So a seconder in Lucy Nessinger.
Yes, I'll make a short statement if that's okay. I am quite shocked by what's happened at this meeting so far, I have to say, in a whole range of different ways. And I have also been pretty shocked by the way in which this whole process has been overtaken in the last few months. The process itself is not pleasant. Having to have these kind of investigations at any institution or any organisation is not pleasant. And there are very clear processes in place to make sure that individuals are protected. We've been told by members opposite that this meeting is not about politics, but is about the protection of staff. But I'm afraid I find that a very difficult position for them to justify. The board members have been told on numerous occasions that the content of the investigation was confidential. But shortly before a crucial election, particular members of the board chose to put forward a motion which brought these matters into the public view. The idea that this was in the interests of staff is extremely difficult to understand, given the very, very clear request that had been made to all members of the board that all of these matters be kept confidential in order to protect the individuals involved. And it was made very clear to us when we were given this information that the reason for confidentiality was to protect the individuals involved. And the fact that that confidentiality has since been broken in numerous different ways puts those members of staff in an incredibly difficult position, and their position is much more difficult than it would have been if that confidentiality had been kept. I've been a councillor for over 20 years now, and during that time I've seen some pretty extraordinary behaviour, but I have to say that the behaviour around this investigation, and in fact during this meeting, is some of the most shocking that I've seen. I realise that due process can be quite frustrating, having been pretty frustrated by it in the not too distant past, by the length of investigations, by the need to keep information confidential. I understand just how frustrating those processes can be. But I also absolutely recognise, and I think it's very important to make public, just how important those processes are, and that they are there to protect all of the individuals concerned. And that is why I think it's extremely important that we have this amendment that takes this process through proper procedure. The one final thing I want to say is that, having had code of conduct investigations and complaints brought against me on several occasions in the past, it's never been suggested that as soon as a code of conduct investigation is launched against an individual, they should step aside. Now, there may be some circumstances where that may be necessary, but it hasn't actually been suggested by anybody other than the members opposite that those have been met in this case. And therefore, I think we should let the process take its course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nessinger.
Do we want to a minute whilst we circulate the paper copy of the amendment?
Yeah. Well, I might just read it out. In light of the matters listed in confidential Appendix 1 at exempt Appendix 3 to the report, and the full investigation process already underway following a decision under the member conduct complaints procedure by the Combined Authorities Monitoring Officer, the CPCA Board, the Combined Authority Board fully supports that investigation process and does not support or welcome any interference or prejudgment by board members during that process, or see any justification to cause the Mayor himself to prejudge the outcome. And B, supports on its conclusion, that is the conclusion of the investigation, consideration of any recommendations by the Combined Authority in its Audit and Governance Committee, and that any such recommendations are published according to the clear and proper review processes defined in the Constitution.
So I'll now make a ruling on whether the amendment is valid. And I think in particular, there is a keen interest in whether it negates the original motion, and that motion is read following the refinement made today. So that is essentially in the original form, but essentially inviting Dr. Nick Johnson to voluntarily suspend himself until all of the matters referred to are procedurally concluded. So relating my considerations, because it is important and relevant, of the original motion as put, of course, I needed to ensure that original motion did not interfere or prejudge the member conduct process. Okay. So on that basis, I don't see that the amendment is producing an adverse outcome, because the original motion was not interfering or prejudging the process. Other people may look at it and say, oh, it may have been, it's a bit too close to it and it seems to suggest it. But I would not have admitted the original motion if that was interfering or prejudging the process. That would have been entirely improper. So whilst the language of the amendment is a bit blunt in places, it is still lawful. And in my view, and I appreciate others may hotly contest this, but my view is the only view that you are able to listen to today for the purposes of this meeting. I do not consider it a negation of the motion as presented.
Thank you. So I propose that we continue the debate, but well, I will test public but I will be careful. And as the monitoring officer has said, if we err back into matters that have been in confidential appendices or affect the personal rights of individuals, then in both the recent whistleblowing investigation or in any prejudging of the investigation into the code of conduct issue, then we will go into private session. And even in that, I will rule out comments that are unjustified or well, I will rule out comments where I believe that there's no basis if they are prejudicing a good debate.
Chair, just sorry, Chair. So looking, the fact that we're discussing the W word suggests to me that we're already crossing a line here. So it feels very, very, really, we're on a knife's edge here. And I do feel that if you want a robust debate, you need to seriously consider whether to move this now into private session.
Well, Councillor Bailey.
I'd like to ask the monitoring officer if it is for the chair to rule out or rule in what people say, or the monitoring officer.
So, sorry, I can clarify. I misspoke over rapidly. I just think that I'm particularly concerned about prejudicing, including in private session, an investigation, as well as talking about material in a whistleblowing report.
Excuse me, I asked the monitoring officer a question.
I think it's an illustrative of the challenge we have in managing this meeting, in the sense that ruling out something that's been said is kind of closing the door after the horse has bolted. And procedurally, no, you can't rule comments out. But secondly, if we're, if we are at points where we're wanting to rule out comments because, amongst other things, they are dealing with sensitive matters, then I think we're frankly in a position we don't want to be in, which is discussing certain matters in public.
I'm sorry, but I still haven't actually had an answer to my question. Procedurally, can I establish whose role it is to decide what is and isn't allowed to be said? Is it the chair or is it the monitoring officer?
I've just said, Councillor Bailey, that I will abide by.
So let me assist. So the chair has a number of powers to regulate a meeting, including, for example, seeking to order that a member should be heard no further, or even to adjourn a meeting on disruption. In terms of managing exempt business and whether we should try to keep it in public or private, that's a matter for the meeting to resolve to do. And my advice to the chair is now to seriously consider whether we are now straying so close to those exempt matters that we should, for the good conduct of this meeting, move into private session.
Okay, so I have been aiming to have as much of discussion as possible in private. I will not rule in or out anything that people say if we're in private session. But I am concerned that the quality of discussion has to be of a certain, we just have to have a civilized discussion. And if we just have to take care in making claims, even if we're in private session. Despite a wish to be in public, I will take Councillor Fitzgerald, but I am going to put a proposal to the meeting that we move into private session.
Sure. Just before we go into private session, it's in response to Councillor Netzinger's statement. I just wanted to ask you a question in public. Have you spoken to the staff of the Combined Authority?
Yes.
And so have I.
And so have several of us. I'm moving a motion that we do for this item exclude the press and public. As I said earlier, they will also be excluded on an item entitled transition, which comes up after this. Can I see all those in favour of going into private session? Okay. So we'll pause and thank the public and others who are here, and we will move into confidential session for the remainder of the debate.
Can I just ask a question about, normally when we exclude the press and public, we exclude the press and we turn the public screening off, but other members are sometimes kind of officers of different organisations are allowed to stay.
So I'll actually move the wording. So in terms of there are members of the board who will be entitled to be here. But other than that,